hadn't even finished her soup when his mother leaned across the table, folded her hands like a prayer, and said, "I just think women like you rush into things they don't understand." The air didn't move after that. The room was soft with candlelight, linen napkins, and polished silverware, but her voice cut through all of it like glass. The smile on her face didn't flicker, her tone didn't rise. She said it like she was offering wisdom, like she had done this before and already decided how it ended. The restaurant had been his idea, some place with 18 salads and a dress code you could feel. He wanted it to feel special when she met his mom. That's what he'd said, special. As if special was something you could force into a reservation slot, as if it could survive 3 courses of questions disguised as compliments. "You're very poised. I wouldn't have expected that. So what exactly do you do? Not just online things, right? Are your parents still together? You're so independent. Does that ever make it hard to compromise?" She answered every question with a calmness that felt like steel wrapped in satin. She never raised her voice, never flinched, never once looked to him for help, though she noticed how still he became. Like he had known this would happen, like he just hoped it wouldn't be so loud. By dessert, his mother had stopped asking questions altogether. She just smiled across the table with that tight, practiced look that women wear when they think they've won. Later, in the car, he didn't say anything for 3 blocks. Then, finally, in the parking garage, engine running, he said it, quiet, embarrassed. "She thinks you're not really wife material." Not really wife material. The words sat between them like something foul. "She says you're too ambitious," he continued, eyes on the steering wheel. "Too focused on yourself. She just doesn't think you fit." She didn't cry. Not that night, not the next day either, but something in her began to shift. It wasn't rage. It was clarity, the kind of silence that starts in your spine and moves outward, the kind that makes you stop chasing approval and start building your own ground. She never tried to win his mother over after that. She just smiled back and started taking notes. It didn't happen all at once. The end came in pieces, 100 little silences stacked on top of each other until the weight tipped everything over. At first, it was manageable. He apologized after every awkward dinner, every veiled insult from his mother, every comment about how they were just so different. He'd say things like, "She'll come around," or "Just give it time." But time kept moving, and nothing changed. His mother still looked at her like she was a passing phase he hadn't outgrown yet. Like her success was a threat instead of something to celebrate. The fights began quietly. She asked him once why he never spoke up for her. He said he didn't want to start drama. She asked again a week later, after another evening of being called career-obsessed and difficult. He sighed, said she was being too sensitive. She smiled tightly and stopped asking. Then came the distance. He started staying late at work, forgot to text back, missed dates, rescheduled plans. When she told him she had signed her 3rd client that month, he blinked like he hadn't heard her, mumbled, "That's great," and went back to scrolling. She could feel it unraveling, thread by thread. The day he left, he didn't make it theatrical. He just stood in her kitchen with his hands in his pockets and said, "I don't think this is working anymore." No tears, no yelling, just resignation. She nodded. She didn't beg, didn't try to prove her worth, didn't ask if his mother was proud now. She opened the door and let him go, then stood in the quiet of her apartment, letting the echo of it all settle like dust. That night, she didn't cry. She pulled out her laptop. There was work to do. She buried herself in spreadsheets and branding mock-ups, sent late-night emails, drank too much coffee, slept less, but she was building. Every deal she closed felt like a stitch in something bigger. Every contract she signed layered her life with more freedom, more distance from the version of herself that ever needed to be chosen by someone else. She moved out of the apartment they once toured together, bought a home of her own, painted the walls herself, hung her degrees where she could see them from the kitchen, started hosting dinners with friends who celebrated her loudly and often. The silence that used to ache now held her gently. She didn't watch his stories, didn't scroll his feed. When mutual friends brought him up, she changed the subject. Not out of bitterness, out of peace. Because she had stopped needing people who needed permission to love her. She didn't just let him go. She let the whole version of herself go that once thought love had to be earned through endurance. And in its place, she built a life no one else could shrink. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor on her desk. On the screen, her daughter stirred in the crib, cheeks warm and flushed, thumb still tucked in her tiny fist. The woman glanced at the time, then back to the stack of folders beside her laptop. There were client calls scheduled through noon, a team strategy meeting at 2, and another round of interviews squeezed in between. The company had grown faster than she expected. What started as a solo operation from her kitchen table had now become a full-fledged brand with a small but loyal team. They had just landed their biggest partnership to date, and her calendar had begun filling faster than she could breathe between tasks. Somewhere between pitch decks and investor calls, she realized what she needed most was help, not with the business, with the baby. Her assistant, Claire, had taken charge of the search. "You need someone trustworthy," she had said. Discreet, local, experienced. Over the last 2 weeks, she'd read through more than 30 applications, met with 7 candidates, and narrowed it down to 3. One stood out: professional background, clean references, years of experience, former teacher, longtime nanny for 2 high-profile families, polite, detailed, flexible. She hadn't looked closely at the name at first. Her eyes had been drawn more to the bullet points and the schedule availability. There was a photo, too blurred and small, scanned into a PDF. The interview was scheduled for 11. At 10:55, she heard a knock at the front door. She called out for Claire to let them in, adjusting her blouse and reaching to close the baby monitor window on her screen. She looked up when she heard the footsteps, and then froze. The woman who entered was familiar, too familiar. Hair pulled neatly into a bun, a structured handbag, sensible shoes, a polite, measured smile. It took less than a second to place her. His mother, she had aged a little, lines sharper around the mouth, shoulders held with more tension than before, but it was her. There was no mistaking it. She didn't seem to recognize her. Not yet. The woman extended her hand and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity." There was a pause, a beat just long enough for something to shift. She kept her face still, shook the hand, offered a tight smile. Claire stood behind her, clipboard in hand, unaware of the weight in the room. They sat down. The questions began. Her ex's mother answered every one with practiced calm. She spoke of children she had helped raise, families she had worked with, skills she had refined over time. Still, no flicker of recognition. No memory of the girl at the dinner table years ago, the one she had judged too quickly, shrugged off too easily. But the girl wasn't here anymore. In her place sat a woman with her own company, her own child, her own terms. She let the interview play out, voice even, already knowing the outcome. The waiting room smelled faintly of lavender and leather-bound notebooks. It was quiet, save for the occasional tapping of a keyboard from the receptionist's desk. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, spilling across the polished floors in long, soft beams. She stood near the door, watching the next applicant enter. The woman walked in, holding a leather folder close to her chest like it was armor. She wore a navy blazer, slacks, and low heels, everything carefully chosen to say dependable, serious, safe. Her posture was upright but tired. She smiled politely at the receptionist, signed her name in looping script, and took the seat closest to the wall. Then she glanced up. Their eyes met. For a second, time did not exist. The younger woman stayed still, blinking once, twice. Not a flinch, just stillness. The older woman tilted her head slightly, as if trying to place a familiar face, but her expression didn't shift. She smoothed the front of her blazer and sat back in the chair, nervous but composed. She didn't recognize her. Not yet. Claire, the assistant, stepped forward with her usual poise and greeted the woman warmly. "We're ready for you. Right this way." The applicant stood quickly, smoothing the crease in her pants, and followed them into the small interview room. The walls were lined with framed photos, brand campaigns, magazine features, a few certificates, but the most noticeable detail was the calm, commanding energy of the woman seated at the table. She stood and extended her hand. "Thank you for coming in." The older woman shook it, her grip firmer than expected. "It's my pleasure," she said. "I've admired this company from afar for a while now. You've built something really special." There was still no sign of recognition. She offered a small nod and gestured for her to sit. "I go by Taylor Ellis here," she said, voice steady. A lie, just a sliver, a rearranged version of her real name, enough to keep the moment neutral. She didn't owe the truth yet, not until she was ready to deliver it the way she wanted to. The questions began. Experience with infants, emergency training, how she handles high-pressure environments. She answered them all smoothly, opening the folder to show reference letters printed on thick cream paper. One was from a senator's wife, another from a corporate CEO's family. Impressive. The woman kept talking, trying to impress her, sharing stories about being firm but gentle, about creating routines that help children feel safe. She even made a small joke about how kids these days were smarter than we give them credit for. She didn't notice the tension in Taylor's shoulders, didn't hear the silence that followed certain answers, didn't feel the shift in air each time their eyes locked. She had no idea that the woman across from her was the same girl she once called too focused, too ambitious, too much. The same girl she told her son would never be wife material. Now here she was, asking her for a job. The offer letter went out 2 days later. No call, no direct message, just a clean email from the HR address her assistant managed. It included a background check form, a contract, confidentiality terms, and a start date. She didn't sign it herself, didn't speak to her. Not yet. She wasn't hiding. She was just choosing to remain still, to let the story unfold on its own timing. Her assistant sent the welcome packet. The older woman accepted the role without question. By the end of the week, she was standing in the foyer of the townhouse again, this time holding a tote with baby books and a reusable water bottle. Her hair was pinned up, her outfit practical, sensible shoes, soft expression, a woman who had been through a few things, and perhaps come out the other side quieter for it. She was kind. That part surprised her. Not overly familiar, not fake, just warm enough. She arrived early, took careful notes during the walkthrough, asked all the right questions, made no assumptions. When introduced to the baby, her smile grew softer. She crouched to eye level, said hello gently, and didn't try to force affection. The baby reached for her without hesitation. It was almost enough to forget. Almost. The weeks went by quickly. The business continued to grow. New hires, new clients. Mornings blurred into late nights. She found herself grateful for the help. The woman was good at what she did. Efficient, calm under pressure. The baby liked her, trusted her, and so she said nothing. Let the arrangement live in its strange balance, a secret wrapped in routine. They kept a professional distance. The woman never overstepped, never pried, just did her job and did it well. Sometimes she'd hum while folding blankets or read aloud softly during naps. There were moments when they passed each other in the hallway and exchanged only a nod, sometimes a smile. Neither of them brought up the past. Because to one of them, it didn't exist. Until one afternoon, over the sound of the baby babbling on the playmat, the woman said it. "You know," she said, folding a onesie and smoothing it flat, "you remind me of someone my son used to date. Years ago, she was ambitious, like you, smart. I didn't think they were a good fit." Her voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact, like she was recalling a weather report. She didn't look up. She was too focused on herself, if I'm honest. I told him it wouldn't work, and I was right. Still folding, still speaking casually, like the words weren't falling like glass. Across the room, the woman she was speaking to stood still, hand paused on a mug of tea. She said nothing. Didn't correct her, didn't smile. Just let the silence stretch out long enough for the words to sit, to echo, to settle into the walls of the very home she helped build, the same home she now ran, the same child she now protected, the same woman she still didn't recognize, and maybe never would. The dinner was set for 7, the table was long, lined with white taper candles, polished flatware, and hand-lettered place cards. Everything gleamed with a quiet sort of power, not flashy, not forced, just curated down to the breath. She stood at the far end, hair swept into a soft knot, voice low and warm as she greeted each guest by name. executives, partners, clients who had flown in from different cities just to sit at this table. Her assistant moved between conversations, refilling wine, ushering arrivals, and at the very edge of it all, tucked just beyond the sliding glass door, was the nanny, seated with the baby at the corner of the terrace. The child was fussy, overtired, cheeks pink from the long day. The nanny rocked her gently in her lap, whispering stories in a practiced rhythm. Nothing new, nothing unexpected, until the little girl lifted her head, looked across the garden toward her mother, and called out clear, certain, delighted. "Mommy." The voice cut through the chatter like a thread pulled tight. Every conversation paused, forks paused mid-air, heads turned just for a second, and the nanny froze. Her arms stiffened, her eyes locked onto the woman at the table. Something shifted behind them, a flicker of realization, recognition, then a full stillness that wrapped around her like ice. She looked again, closer. The woman standing at the head of the table, smiling as she adjusted her daughter's curls and handed her back to the nanny, was not someone she vaguely remembered. It was her, the same girl she had dismissed at dinner years ago, called too ambitious, too selfish, too independent to ever be a wife, the same woman her son had let go without understanding what he was losing. The same woman who had opened the door to her home and handed her a job application without revealing who she was. Now she sat in tailored silk, answering questions about international expansion, her face lit by candlelight, her laughter easy, her confidence impossible to ignore. The nanny did not speak. She sat very still, the child resting against her shoulder, heartbeat loud in her ears. No one said anything, not directly, not to her. But the silence around her thickened, the weight of it sank into the skin. She realized in that moment that she had been standing inside a story she once tried to write out of existence, and that every room she had once guarded was nothing compared to the one she served in now. From that night on, she addressed her differently. Softer, slower, with eyes that did not dart away. She came early, stayed later, asked before assuming, not out of guilt, but out of something else. Something like reverence. Something like the sharp echo of a name she once dismissed, now spoken quietly through every hallway, embroidered into every hour of her day. She never brought it up. She didn't have to, because now she knew